We have an absolutely huge bit of news and a major step forward in the criminal investigation of Donald Trump, his associates, and his organization. And I am going to go back to what is sometimes called the boiling frog situation, because it really applies here in terms of the normalization of what's going on. Yesterday, we learned that the Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. has convened a grand jury to decide whether to indict former President Donald Trump or his associates or other elements of the Trump organization. This means that the district attorney at least believes that he has evidence of possible crimes. Otherwise, you don't convene a grand jury. Whether the crime was committed by Trump himself or someone close to Trump or all of the above, we don't yet know. And that is exactly what the grand jury will determine. The Washington Post reports that the panel was convened recently and will sit 3 days a week for 6 months. This is not super surprising in terms of the duration. White collar crimes take a lot of grand jury time. The cases are complicated, and typically grand juries look at more than one matter. So it probably isn't all Trump all the time for the period that they will be on the grand jury. Now, as you might remember, Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance has been investigating Donald Trump's pre-presidency business dealings for more than 2 years now. And part of that was slowed down because while Donald Trump was president, he was able to regularly obstruct Vance obtaining his tax records. That stopped when Trump left office, and those records were directed to be provided to Cyrus Vance relatively recently. And this is an important detail. This investigation relates to things Trump and his company did before Trump was president and not during. Now, Vance's office said in court filings that it was investigating, quote, possibly extensive and protracted criminal conduct at the Trump organization. This includes tax fraud, insurance fraud, falsification of business records, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, before looking at the details, a grand jury looking at a former president is a huge deal. It's enormous. And we have to understand that we're going to look at some things that former prosecutor Renato Mariotti said, and we're going to talk about, is Trump likely to ever go to prison? The answer is no. But consider the sort of, the boiling frog in the skillet. You slowly turn up the temperature. It doesn't notice that it's getting burned. Consider how far we've come, where, as Asha Rangappa said on Twitter, before the presidency, the Access Hollywood grab him by the you-know-what tape. Oh, my goodness, this is crazy. This is the craziest thing we've ever seen. We have a grand jury now considering indictments of a former president, and it didn't even make that big of news. Like, it made news, but it wasn't that big. So think about the degree to which things have slid over the last many years. Now, former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti, who has been a guest on this show, had a good Twitter thread about the meaning of all of this, and just a few points that Renato makes. One, quote, the mere fact that a special grand jury was impaneled does not mean that any particular person will be charged. It does not necessarily mean that Trump himself will be charged, but it is fair to say that Vance's investigation is far along and that charges are on the horizon. Does not mean it will be against Trump. Number two, when it comes to Trump himself in cases like this, it's often about what you can prove Trump knew when you're talking about this type of fraud in white collar crime. And Renato tweets, quote, whenever I investigated tax or fraud cases, the case came down to whether we had sufficient proof of the defendant's knowledge of the false statements contained in the documents. That state of mind is what distinguishes fraud from a mere mistake. A slip up is not fraud. Very similar to perjury. People say things that are not true while under oath in court all the time. But why don't we often see perjury charges? Because you have to prove they didn't just make a mistake. It wasn't just a misrecollection, that they were really lying. And state of mind is a big part of that. And lastly, Renato tweets, quote, fraud is just when you lie to people to get their money. So the case usually comes down to whether the defendant knew the statements in the documents were false. It's easier to prove knowledge for people involved in preparing or authorizing the documents, like Weisselberg. Weisselberg was one of the top Trump organization people. And then in terms of expectations, and this matches what I've been saying for some time, Renato tweets, quote, don't be surprised if people like Weisselberg are their initial target to induce him or others to flip. Someone like Trump or his children will only have liability if they knew of the false statements and participated in the scheme in some way or moved it forward somehow. So this doesn't change any of the things we've said. Trump maybe would be charged. No way that this leads to Trump going to prison. But, if Trump were a normal person, I would probably be saying this guy's going to prison. They've got this guy. And what I mean by that is, think back to the Michael Cohen indictment and conviction. Michael Cohen names Trump in the case in which Michael Cohen went to prison for his crimes. That's Trump's personal lawyer. That would normally be a major sign that Trump is guilty of something. But this is a rich former president, and we have a two-tier justice system in the United States. And these, at their core, are crimes for which you really need to prove state of mind. So this may go on for a long time. It will certainly trigger Trump. I don't think Trump ends up in prison, but let's talk about the reaction from the former president next. One of our sponsors is Hydrant, which is a delicious fruit drink powder that you mix into water for rehydration. And they're giving you 25% off your first order. It's made with 4 key electrolytes that the body needs, powerfully supporting your hydration. Hydrant tastes great. It's made with real fruit juice. It's been a great part of my daily routine for a while now. Keeping myself hydrated puts me in a better mood. The body needs hydration for basic energy and focus, and Hydrant is the perfect way to rehydrate, especially because it's cost-effective and lower in sugar compared to all of those popular sports drinks that are out there. You really have to try it for yourself to see what I mean. It tastes great. They also have a variety called Hydrant Immunity, packed with vitamins A, B, C, and D, which is also very much worth trying. Hydrant has a full refund guarantee if you're not satisfied, and you'll get 25% off your first order when you go to drinkhydrant.com/Pakman, or just enter the code Pakman at checkout. I've put the link right underneath this video.